using the 1.2mm nozzle to make lots of these parts. So you can see how fat those extrusions are,
Oh
how
no,
fat the infill is,
to
and how
3D
big those
printer.
parts are. And there's several of those to
Enjoy
support
your
all
meal,
of those Omni
thank you.
wheels at 120 degrees apart. This one has support material in to put in some 40/40 extrusion, but on the whole there's huge chunky parts going to make up the structure. There's also some parts printed with a thinner nozzle, and those to allow tolerancing so that we can insert them in the fatter parts and use them to hold bearings and so on. Thanks to 3D Fuel for the filament for this project, you can now get 10% off at 3dfuel.com with my special code and link, and I'll get a small commission. We're going to be using O-drives for this project, which was the same on the screw bike. These are 8325 motors, and they have a magnet on the back so that we can put the O-drive S1 driver sandwiched on the back, and it can control position, velocity, or torque. These come in a kit with all the mounting plates, and we've got 4 of those in total, so we've got one of those to drive each of the 4 driven wheels out of 6. Each motor is mounted on a 3D printed plate, and that plate is attached to one of the big chunks made with a 1.2mm nozzle, so that fits neatly in there so I can get to the connectors. Thanks to Simply Bearings for the bearings for this project. There are lots of bearings in the wheels and in the idlers and everywhere else. So this thing comes in 2 sides. We've got those pieces I made with a finer nozzle that we can insert those bearings in. The bearings are pushed in either end, and then those black things are going to get inserted into the chunky prints, and you can see that that's really well toleranced. So those get glued in, and that means I only have to reprint that part should the tolerancing be bad rather than the whole thing. So here are our Omni wheel assemblies. These come in 2 halves with a spacer in between, and that is fitted onto a square axle made of 2020 extrusion with a pulley on one side.
I didn't do my exercises
again.
again.
To the 2020 and holds everything firm. And of course those roll in one direction and
Another day without even
We've got 2 drive
one
belts
push-up.
in that gearbox and an intermediate pulley. This is essentially a converter from a T5 to an HDD8, and this is actually not much of a reduction, but it's the same reduction that we had in the screw bike, and so taking into account the ball diameter, we should get the same velocity on the wheel. So obviously that intermediate gear sits in between the motor and the wheel itself, and it offers some reduction but not much. So we now have the other half to insert, which has bearings, a little stud that goes in the motor to hold it, and a hole for that pulley so that everything is tensioned and everything stays tight. Here is one assembled unit, so we should find that we've got that intermediate pulley, the wheel, the motor, and all of those belts are tensioned, and everything is double braced at both ends of the axle, so that's nicely back drivable and everything moves smoothly. And on the other side we've got this curved cutout, which is where the ball is going to sit, and that wheel of course is going to rest on the ball to drive it. There are 4 of these that I've had to assemble for our 4 driven units to drive our 2 balls, so those are looking pretty good, and I did remember to make mirrored pairs of course. These are looking pretty good, and
Guys, my balls are looking pretty good.
I've left provision to put an idler in on each of the belts if I want to tighten the belts up if they stretch, but basically just the spacing looks perfect at the moment, and hopefully, if I've worked this out right, then we should have the same reduction onto these wheels, taking into account the ball that we did have with the screw bike, so we should have enough power, but I'm just going to power one of these up and see how torquey it is. The O-Drive tool allows me to run this and monitor the velocity, current, and the position of each of the motors.